Yeah. What you're describing is a culture. What you're describing is a culture within which you work. It's not tangible, it's intangible very much. And it's an organic culture. But that culture wasn't created overnight. And I think if we look to see how that culture has grown, the police culture has grown, how and why and where it came from. I mean, people often say to me, oh, yeah, you were policing in the 80s, 90s, it's all changed now. But that culture was organic when I was in the job, and it has grown, and it has changed, and it has morphed. But the fundamentals of that culture are still there. And that's what must be understood. When I joined, the fundamentals of the police culture from the 60s and 70s were still prevalent. Still prevalent. And what was happening in the 60s and 70s? Well, we had an influx of African Caribbeans, as we know. And we know, for various reasons, they were treated very poorly by the police. There's lots of evidence to support that. There's a book or a paper called Nigger Hunting that was written by a black scholar at that time that described how off-duty and on-duty Metropolitan Police officers would go out and collar the first black person they saw, rough him up. And anyway, so there's lots of anecdotal evidence and some empirical evidence to say that black people would. So that was a culture at that time. That culture's changed, but the fundamentals of that culture are still there. And so we have to really understand how the culture, the police culture, has grown up. And if we begin to understand the culture, then you can make the necessary interventions to change it. So there's a lot of discussion at the moment. We've got to change the culture. Well, how does that work? How's that going to happen? How's that going to happen? Because you know, sitting there, that this culture is so powerful, so persuasive, that some black officers, and this is what I said in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry when I gave testimony, my testimony defined institutional racism. And I talked about the canteen culture, I talked about the police culture, and I talked about how pervasive it was. And I said we're all consumed by this culture. And I said, by all, I mean black officers too. So black officers will often act in the same way as everyone else because it is part of the culture. So it's not unusual for black officers then to deny problems because they want to be a part of the culture, which is very powerful. They want to be popular, they want to get the jobs, they want to get promoted or whatever.
I realised that in the first.
So to step outside of the culture is seen as rocking the boat. You're a troublemaker. And do you really want to do that?
See, in your first 2 years, for people that don't know, your probation. And I fully understand and I agree with everything that you said in terms. And for me, that more so applied in my first 2 years. In your probation, because you're like, you've got responsibilities, you may have a family or you may have things that you need to pay for, so you're like, I can't afford to get fired, so I just need to say yes to everything, and I need to just be like, I need to focus on what I'm doing, and people will just turn a blind eye to stuff, and like for me within this job, when I had people always used to ask, oh, is it racist? Are the people outside racist? And I always said the same thing. And I've got no problem saying this on camera. That I got more racism inside than I did outside. And I found that mind-blowing. Not because I didn't think the Met were racist as such. Racism is everywhere. So to think that within this organisation there wouldn't be is just stupid to me. But it's just silly. But it dawned on me, I was like, I'm going outside to Soho, I'm dealing with white people, black people, Asian, everyone, all types of people. And it took years before anyone racially abused me. Years. It was under a year before I got, my situation was really, really serious to the point where it nearly made me leave. I nearly left, and I haven't really spoken about that to anyone, but I nearly left this job. Because I was just like, wait a second. What I always said is, the way I treat people is always say, I treat people how I would like to be treated, and B, as if we're outside all the time and they can knock me out if they wanted to. I always say that to everyone, and people always go, "Oh, how do you get on with people?" I say, I treat them like if they can beat me up. And how much respect do you give to people that can beat you up? So you always give them the utmost respect, whether they're a giant or a small person, woman, anything. Give you super respect. So it's just it was just a lot for me in the first 2 years. So I totally agree with what you're saying, that like officers will sit down, you have that canteen culture, even if they don't play a part actively, they still want to fit in. So whether it's turning a blind eye, whether it's not
they
addressing
accomplish
certain things,
it by what they don't say, and by
100%.
what they don't do.
Yeah.
So everyone who is in the organisation understands how the culture works.
Yeah, because everyone's been there, isn't it?
And everyone's been there, regardless of how senior they are.
Yeah.
And so, you asked me in the beginning, what do I feel now? I feel a degree of I've been there, and I look at some of the senior officers and I think, I know you've been there, and I know you've witnessed what I've been through. So why are you now pretending that you don't really understand how the culture works? Because you were part of that culture.
It's
Yeah. So
you're right.
I look at some of the guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, who have been interviewed on the TV, and I look at their service and I think, you were there. You were there. And please, don't say your memory is that short, because you know what we had, as minorities had to go through in order to survive. Oh, you probably didn't. But, what used to happen on the senior command courses, chief superintendents, when they were being prepared for bigger things, going on to become chief officers, there was a special course at the police college, which was then Brams Hill. So they used to go on this extended course, and they used to invite black officers to go and talk about their experiences on the course. But I stopped doing it, and I talk about why I stopped doing it in the book. Because you were like a prop. You were brought in, you were given a meal, okay, sit there, and you were facing, 25, white men and women, mostly men, and then it was like, well, so what's it like for you?
Yeah.
It's like, okay. And then you would tell.
It's funny you say that. That's how officers feel right now. That's why black officers don't really want to talk, because they're just like, I'm not going to be your dancing monkey. I'm not doing it. And I used to be like that too. I know officers, my friends that are officers are now are like, no. They swear that it's the craziest thing. They are police officers, so they work for the Metropolitan Police, but they say they will never help this job. They're like, nope, I am not helping this job. I'm not promoting this job. I'm not. And I'm just like, I used to be the same. I used to be like, no, I'm not. And then I thought to myself, wait a second. I'm the kind of person, I can't sit down, moan about something to which I can affect change with. So I'm like, am I going to be that person, Dom?
Sure.
I can't be that person. So I have to at least try. Because my friend, when I started doing, like, speaking to people, my friend turned to me and goes, Dom, you know nothing's going to change. He's black. He's like, nothing's going to change. But he also said he will help me, and he respects what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
But he said he's never going to... You'll never see him supporting, saying, "Oh, come be a police officer."
Yeah, it was interesting. Those very words, when I was at the Bristol seminars, 2-day seminars, and at the end of the first day, we were invited to go. One representative from each syndicate was invited to the front to talk about their experiences, and I got up, and this guy that I had worked with, a Trinidadian, at Croydon, he said, Paul, where are you going? I said, I'm going to say my bit. He said, things are not going to change, don't you?
You know when that happened, I read that. I was like, that happened to me. That was me and my friend. He said the same thing. Yeah. And he could be right. Yeah. And they could
That was 1990.
Yeah.
That was 1990.
To an extent, they'll probably be right to an extent, but is it better now? It's a million times better than I am not going through what you went through. So clearly you made a massive change. So you were right, and he was technically still right, because
it was
there's not a full change.
change is
subjective, isn't it?
It's very subjective, and it depends on, you know, where you are and the time, and, you know, all sorts of variables as to how you measure progress.
Yeah.
You know, we're not slaves anymore. That's huge progress. But,
Yeah.
you know, we're still faced with lots and lots of challenges.
Yeah.
So people say things have not changed quickly enough, and we haven't gone far enough.
Yeah.
And that probably the case, but things are a lot better than they were. But it,
Yeah.
as you say, it's very subjective.
Yeah. Because at the same time, you say people will challenge and say, "Oh, well, if it was that racist, how did you come to a chief superintendent?"
Superintendent.
Yeah, a superintendent. How did you get to that position if it was so racist? And people will always argue that. I mean, how did you get there if it's that racist? And you're just like, well, I worked my butt off. But how did you get there? Go on, tell me.
I think you need to read the book.
I need to read the book. That's what you do. You refer everyone back to the book. No.
It was.
That's a good enough answer.
No. I think you deserve an answer because you asked the question, and it's quite a very, very relevant question, because people will look at me and say, "Well, cool, you made it. Did I make it? Could I have been a chief constable? Could I have been a chief constable? There are some around me that think I probably could have been a chief constable." But the reason I got to superintendent, because I learned the language of the job. Essentially, I learned to navigate, and I learned to manoeuvre, and I learned to equip myself with skills that really couldn't be challenged. You know, I did a master's degree in community safety.
Okay.
And I think when something like that happens, it can't be taken away from you. Yes. And it does equip you with lots of skills and additional skills that kind of set you aside from the crowd, perhaps.
You become an expert.
And so there's lots of things. And I went out of my way to seek different experiences. But I do talk in the book about how we as black people, as minorities, do not tend to do that. Do not tend to put ourselves on offer, because we've got this far, we've got into the job, we've been accepted, and actually we're getting on quite well where we are, and I'm one of the team now, but I worked hard to get where I am, and I had to put up with a load of rubbish to get where I am. But it seems as though now I'm a member of the team and I'm being valued and I get on quite well with everyone. And so why do I want to step outside my comfort zone and become a sergeant or an inspector and have to go through all of that again that I've just been through? Because it's not good for my mental health. And even going into a specialist posting, what am I going to face in the specialist post? So it's the unknown for us minorities.
But do you think that is more so with people that haven't been to like university? Because you know a lot of officers they're not educated to that level. So you know, but now I would say black and Asian officers are more so. They're coming with graduates. Or do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Whereas maybe the officers that aren't, that's why they feel less comfortable. They're like, oh, I have to revise again or revise, and it's daunting. So for me, revising is nothing.
I think you make a very good point, and probably it's not as simple as that. But there are some blockages. There are some blockages that are preventing black people climbing the ladder.
Do you mean the higher end of the ladder?
Do I think they're physical blockages? Not necessarily. I think sometimes it's within us. I think, and there's books being written on this subject. Actually, there's books being written on this subject as to why we're less likely to want to apply for specialist posts. We want to specialist posts and or promotion. And I think it's up here. It's because of our perceptions, perhaps. It's because of our comfort. It's because of what we've been through in order to get this far. So I think it's a multitude of things as to why we're not climbing that ladder. Of course, there are occasions when we're physically blocked. Our face doesn't fit, so we're not going to get through the necessary procedures. But going back to how I kind of made it to superintendent, I kind of learned the game. I learned to play the game, and I became, you know, and I even went to the extreme length of leaving the job on a secondment, because I didn't feel it was comfortable for me within the Metropolitan Police. You know, I'd said things that upset people, and so I felt I had to leave, and I got myself seconded to the civil service, actually, which was fantastic. You know, it really opened my eyes, and it equipped me with more skills.
Yeah.
Some very relevant skills, actually. And so when I came back in, I was much stronger.
When did you go to civil service?
I worked on something called the Neighbourhood Renewal Strategy, which was Prime Minister Tony Blair's strategy for renewing disadvantaged neighbourhoods around England and Wales, effectively. It's a political strategy. It had limited success, but there were some interesting things came out of it. I mean, again, if you read in the book, that's where our PCSOs come from.
Okay.
I mean, people don't realise that, but you will realise it once you read the book.
Yeah.
But PCSOs were as a direct result of the neighbourhood renewal strategy. Yeah. And I suspect many police officers do not realise that, do not appreciate that. Because I was there, and I worked on something called neighbourhood wardens that were part of the neighbourhood renewal strategy. Neighbourhood wardens then morphed into police community support officers. And there was a reason that happened.
You?
Sorry?
Was it you, yeah?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, not at all.
So,
not at all.
What I was going to ask, what was your best experience as a police officer?
Gosh.
We're going to go best and worst.
Gosh, the best. I mean, helping form the Black Police Association had got to be my best experience, you know. Because, you know, after the Bristol seminars...
I totally forgot you did that, and I knew, because it's somewhere, I think it's in the beginning, but it says, well, I Googled you. Yeah. That was it.
Yeah.
Wait, how did that come about? You helped... That is...
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can understand the scale or the gravitas of what you just said. You helped form it. Yeah. Because there wasn't one prior to when? When did it first... When was it?
Our first meetings were held in 93.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 1993. Yeah. Our first meetings. 2.5 years after the Bristol seminars. So the Bristol seminars were absolutely critical for us black officers, because for the first time we were brought together in great numbers and were able to talk quite freely about our experiences. Yeah. So it was a life-changing experience. It was a life-changing, and for me, it really changed my perspective, my view of life within the Metropolitan Police. And for me, it was a great experience, and I wanted to be a part of what was happening next. So I applied to become a part of the project team that emanated from the Bristol seminars. So I became part of the Bristol seminar project team. Yeah. So I moved, as a sergeant, I moved from Catford to Tintagel House, where the project team was located. And that was the start of the journey for me, really. And that led to a number of things happening and not happening. And I think it's fair to say it's what didn't happen. It's the promises that were broken, as a result of Bristol, that caused a nucleus of us, like 10, 15, 20 of us, to meet on a regular basis, to come together after the seminars, 2.5 years, and meet at Drummond Gate in Pimlico and say, okay, we've been through Bristol, promises are made, what's changed? Nothing's really changed. Is anything going to change? There's no evidence that anything's going to change. Do we need to establish a Black Asian support network? Yes, we do. Should that be informal or should that be formal? We need to make it formal. Do we need the help of the Metropolitan Police to do that? No, we don't. We're going to do it regardless. We've got seniority here. We've got a chief inspector, 2 chief inspectors. We've got an inspector. We've got sergeants. We're well equipped to make this work. We'll go to outside agencies, the Association of Black Probation Officers, Society of Black Lawyers, and we'll get their help. and we'll set up, and we're going to launch ourselves. We don't know what that's going to look like. We're going to launch ourselves, and we're going to become established. So we met thereafter.
That part in the book?
It is.
Okay, cool. I can't wait to get to that bit, because that is super interesting to me, because that's you're a pioneer.
Yeah. So that led to the formal launch of the Black Police Association in '94.
That's so cool.
September. And and we were seen as kind of troublemakers. We were labelled all sorts of things, I guess. But it wasn't until Stephen Lawrence happened, the Stephen Lawrence inquiry happened
You were part of that,
in the towards the end of the 90s, that the Black Police Association was absolutely taken seriously.
Yeah.
And had to be taken seriously, because this was the biggest inquiry into police and community relations that had ever taken place in the history of the Metropolitan Police.
It's weird that it took so long, because for me to remember it, I'm like, I remember Stephen Lawrence because I was born in '86, so I remember that time. Maybe I didn't understand the impact of it as such, but I knew it was like, wait, what? There's a lot of change going on right now. This is weird. But at that time, I wasn't thinking about being a police officer. So, when did it happen, Stephen Lawrence? What year was it?
Well, he was murdered in '93.
Yeah,
he was murdered. He was murdered the day after the very first meeting of that nucleus group from the Bristol seminars.
I feel like I was older. I was only 7. But
he was murdered in '93, the day after. Of course, we didn't. It was a murder of a black youth. It didn't. At the time, it didn't mean much or anything. Actually, it was just another murder in London.
Yeah.
It was only as things began to unravel.
Yeah.
Did we begin to understand that, hold on, something's not right here. And then obviously Doreen and Neville Lawrence started their campaigning and bringing attention to, and the Black Police Association actually supported that campaign. So that was kind of a seminal moment for me. And I suppose if you were to ask me what was the best time, my best time in the Met, I think it was that particular period. From '93 to probably '99.
What rank were you when you were
I was
when you were doing the BPA, starting that? But what were you?
I was a sergeant.
Okay, cool.
I was a sergeant then, and I got promoted to inspector. And it was when I became an inspector, I eventually became chairman. Because up until that point, I'd been general secretary. I was always general secretary. From day one, I was the general secretary. And I never missed a meeting between 1993 and 1999.
So
I
you knew
never
everything that was going on?
missed a meeting. No, I knew everything that was going on. I knew the politics within the organisation and outside. So,
were you then hated by like white officers?
No, I don't think we were hated. It was just suspicion. Suspicion. They were very suspicious of us.
But that's baffling, because what could you possibly be suspicious of? As such, if that makes it like.
I think you have to understand the mentality at the time, and I allude to it in the book.
Yeah.
Because for 2 black officers, when I joined, to sit together in the canteen was an absolute no-no.
You're the second person to say that to me today. There's a guy on my team.
Yeah.
And he says, he goes, Dom. He's like, I didn't talk to any black officers. He started in 1992, I think.
1992,
yeah.
you see.
And he was like, nah. It's weird that he's still in the office now.
Yeah.
He's out, still proactive. He started in 1992, and he's just like, no, didn't talk to him. I was like, what do you mean didn't talk to him? He's like, I didn't talk to him. And I was like, that's what he says in the book. And he's like, nah.
You were conspiring.
Yeah.
You were plotting to overthrow them. It was ludicrous, but the culture was so strong.
Yeah,
the police culture was so strong. You would avoid other black officers. You would avoid being seen talking to other black officers, because you knew that would bring about caustic comments, whispers, and what are those two up to? That kind of thing.
That is still happening right now. You know that it's still black officers will walk past each other, and it's mind blowing to me. I say hello to everyone. I'm like, I'll give you at least a head nod. I'm like, you're right. But it still happens now, and I wonder why it. That's something I'm going to look into. Why does it still happen now? Because me personally, I don't feel pressure. Maybe it's the environment I'm in personally. I don't have that. There are white officers I work with, but I don't have that negativity. Maybe where they're like, I don't want to, as you say, rock the boat, because they could be new or they could be on team, and maybe their team don't really like that. And not to say that their team's racist, but I'm just saying maybe it's totally different environment for them. So,
but to understand, if you went to work for British Airways, that culture doesn't exist. If you went to work for Marks and Spencer's, that culture doesn't exist. So you need to understand, why does that culture exist within the Metropolitan Police? And I go back to what I was saying earlier. Culture is organic, it grows, but it grows from something. And you have to understand what it's grown from. Therefore, you need to understand your history. As a black person in this job, you need to understand the history of what's happened before, to understand what's happening today. Because what you've described to me suggests to me that element of the culture is still pervasive.
So, yeah, because it is, but then you've got people like me who just literally, I don't care. I literally don't care. If I see a black, I will go over there, like, what's going on? How you doing? You cool? I'm Dom, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes I might be a bit of a recluse and not want to talk to anyone. People like, your face is a bit, you look intimidating. But normally, I will talk to black officers, because I know how it felt when I first started. And you know how it feels to be alone when you're a black officer. When you're black anything, normally you feel alone in organizations. So I wouldn't want anyone else to feel that way. So I always go talk to them and be like, nah, you're not going to be the person that you.
Can I just say on that point about being alone? One of the things to come out of Bristol was that very issue. So the 2-day seminar at Bristol, where we could speak very, very freely about our experiences and about our, understanding. One of the things that came out very strongly is that officers were often posted to stations where they were the only black face, and it's a very isolating experience. So one of the support mechanisms to come out of Bristol was that black officers pointed to a station should be given a mentor.
Yeah.
Should be given a buddy, right?
I think.
Should be given a buddy. Now, I understand there's still a debate to this day about whether or not black officers should be given a buddy. Now, when you consider this happened in 1990, it didn't happen because the police culture was too strong and it was diluted and it fell by the wayside. So that didn't happen, but it was one of the recommendations to come out of Bristol.
Do you think that would have been a good idea? I mean, you know what? It wouldn't have been a bad thing. That's what I would say. Because to say it would work and be great, I don't know. But it would never be bad. I don't think it would be detrimental to anyone as such.
Yeah,
having another black person be like,
my view is that you leave police training college in my day, Hendon. Yeah. I don't know where you do your training now.
Yeah.
But no one actually prepares you for the police culture. No one actually prepares you for the police culture. So, in my case, I'd worked for the police for 3 years. So I should have known what to expect. And I knew a little of what to expect.
Yeah.
But for the ordinary guy and girl on the street, they don't know what to expect. So suddenly they're plunged into this environment called the police culture.
Are you referring to the time when you started? Or
I'm talking about in general. So you don't know what to expect. So I think it could be very supportive. It could be very supportive if even outside of your work, you could talk to someone about what you're experiencing.
Yeah, no, you're right, because I was comparing it to my friend. He's just started, and he's come because he's friends with all my friends out here, and he's joined recently. And for him, it's probably significantly easier because he already knows like 10 people. So you already know 10 police officers, and they're all black, and then they're going to introduce you to also people that aren't black as well. And even just saying, "Oh yeah, I know Dom," people are like, "Oh yeah, I know Dom." Dom's from black, and it makes his life probably 100 times easier. Just knowing someone that everyone else is. So I would agree.
Sure.
I get where you're going.
So these issues, actually, people say, oh, you were around in the 80s and 90s, things have changed. Yeah, things have changed, but the kind of the interventions that we're trying to make, they seem to be recycled from my day. You know, the same interventions were talked about back then. And I just feel that, 30, 40 years later, we should have a grasp of what's happening to black officers in the organisation. And I don't pick up that understanding. And I look at the key people at the top, and I think, why don't you understand? What is it? Selective amnesia or whatever. Yeah.
So I've spoken to the commissioner, the deputy commissioner. What I would say, they've only ever been supportive to me. So I couldn't necessarily say anything bad or negative about them, because they've let me pretty much do what I want. So I'm like, okay, cool. So the onus is on me to do whatever I want and to see the change, because they're saying, yeah, go on, you can start. So I don't know, it's just weird, because after speaking to you, I understand that there's still seeds of everything that happened in your day, but it's just manifesting itself in a different way and less overt.
Yeah.
And I think you're right in that it hasn't, there hasn't been enough progress, or essentially it should be eradicated, because the officers that went through it are still here, or some of them are still here, and they'll be in senior leadership. So they would have been, not all of them, because that may be an issue, because there's a lot of fast track scheme, maybe SLT now, and maybe they've never experienced it, so they're like, but then you're still on the other hand, there are officers that have been back there, maybe 80s, 90s, and they know. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's like, well, wait a second, you're right, selective amnesia, or maybe they just don't know how to rectify the situation. Because if someone was to ask me, how do I fix it? I mean, I've got extreme ways to fix it. I'd be like, well, actually, it's not that extreme. I'd be like, if anyone shows any racist tendencies, not even tendencies, if you're remotely racist, you get fired. But, and I've said this, and I've got no problem saying this on record. People don't get fired for being for racism in this job. That's a problem, and I've said that straight. I think I said that to the deputy.
Yeah,
I mean, I said that's a problem.
Yeah, it's about, it's part of the culture that needs kind of rectifying, and how do we do that? And how do you turn an oil tank around in the middle of the ocean effectively? The Met is a huge organisation. It's not going to happen 5 years. It's not going to happen 10 years.
Well, it's been how many years for you?
And
So
which is why I look at what's being said now and think, yeah, I've heard that before. I'm sorry. I'm not being cynical, but I've heard it before. I'm not hearing anything new. I'm hearing more commitment, but we look at you look at 20-year cycles, Scarman 81, lots of commitment after Scarman. We must do better. We must bring in more black faces, Stephen Lawrence, 20 years later, effectively, Stephen Lawrence Inquiry, 1999, and then what do we have 20 years later? Sarah Everard. So we're looking at, 20 years for some serious introspection to take place. But what happens after that significant event? That significant event only usually lasts 5 years. It's a shelf life for 5 years. So 5 years after Scarman Inquiry, things were back to normal. 5 years after the Stephen Lawrence Inquiry, things were back to normal. Dare I say it, 5 years time, we won't be having this same introspection into the police culture.
Do you think that's because we have too much change in the senior leadership? So do you feel as though if the commissioner now was, say, had a tenure of maybe 10 to 15 years, so you would have that constant, that it would be, do you know what I'm saying, it will be more effective? Because you're right, if you keep changing stuff every 3 to 5 years, it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to get it. It's not sustainable. You're not going to be able to be like, because you're right, like it's like the mayor's policies, the new mayor comes and all of a sudden it's like, okay, cool, now we're doing county lines, that's what we're looking after, and that's what we're targeting. A new mayor, now it's going to be, I don't know, whatever they want to be, and that's the problem, the inconsistency.
There has to be the political will. If the political masters want the change, then the police will.
So what you're saying, we
Make
need
the
black
change.
people in, we need, what's his name, I don't know, Kwasi Kwarteng, or who else we got?
I don't necessarily think you need black politicians or Asian
No?
politicians to make these changes. Remember, it was Jack Straw. It was Jack Straw who was pivotal in ensuring that the public inquiry into the Stephen Lawrence murder was actually introduced. Yeah, so we can't just rely on black and Asian faces in government, because A, they're too far and few between, and then it does, just because you're black and a politician doesn't mean to say you are on the side of black people.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, you might be on the side of your own career. You might be wanting to further your own end, and I'm afraid there's evidence to suggest that that is the case.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can't just rely on black. You know, we have to rely on politicians, and we should always seek to encourage more black politicians. Certainly, as we should always seek to encourage more black police officers. But they shouldn't be there to make the changes we all want to see. Black people should join the police to do what every police officer wants to do: to help people, to arrest criminals, do whatever. Yeah. That's why black people should join the police.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be there to change the system. Yeah. Because that's the job of the commissioner and others to do that.
No doubt.
Yeah. And once you're sidetracked as a black officer into doing that, I can speak from experience here, you know, then your career may well suffer.
Yeah, no, I hear that, because for me, I wouldn't say my career is suffering, but I'm actively campaigning for more black people to join the Metropolitan Police, because to me, the only way we can fix the issues that we have in the Metropolitan Police is if we have mass participation from the black community. And I keep shouting this at people because everyone's like, it's not going to change. And I'm like, of course it's not going to change, because the people that are doing it are still here. So if we participate more, then we are more likely to have a positive effect on the outcomes that we want to see. And be like, and people understand that, but then it's the actual doing it. But what I would say is a lot more black officers are actually joining, and it feels like that there's like some sort of change within the community as well. So I always moan, I'm the worst. I always moan about the black community. It's not that.
But you know, we got to be smart around this issue. We got to be smart, and unfortunately, we have to look to our kind of brothers and sisters in the United States to see where they are today. And I mentioned this a couple of days ago to some friends that there's currently a major litigation taking place in Washington D.C. A number of female police officers, all black, are taking the Metropolitan Police in Washington D.C. to court for racist and sexist behaviour. Now, when you consider that the majority of officers in the Metropolitan Police in Washington D.C. are black, they are where we would dream of being. Yet we have this litigation by black female police officers in Washington saying we're working in an institutionally racist organisation. How can that be? How can that be? Well, of course it can be. Yeah. But we need to be smart in understanding why it can happen if we are in the majority. Yeah. If we're in the majority, how can it happen? Yeah, and that's why we need to understand how the culture works and where the culture comes from and who embraces the culture once they join and who perpetuates the culture. Yeah. Yeah? Because otherwise we just keep going round in circles and we think throwing black faces in the organisation is going to change things. It will not change things. It will make us feel better. It may make the community feel better, warmer, but will it change the outputs of the organisation? Will it? So we need to be smart around these issues, actually. We buy into platitudes too easily. You know, things are getting better. Progress is being made, but there's much more to be done.
No, I hear where you're coming from. I agree. But we're going to start to wrap it up. Okay. You haven't told me your worst experience. Dodge that, and I want to hear it.
That's a bit unfair, actually. Worst experience. Hey,
Because I've read some terrible ones,
Yeah,
and if it's not,
yeah,
if it's
I
none of
think-
the ones I've read by page like 120, then she's
yeah, I suppose, yeah, it's probably my experience of Broadwater Farm in Tottenham.
what, when you were on the bus?
It wasn't just on the bus, it was the whole kind of
That turn.
episode. It was a whole episode of, PC Keith Blakelock,
Yeah.
who was murdered
Yeah.
during the riots. I wasn't actually physically next to Keith at the time, but I wasn't too far away. And so I think we all felt it. But as the sole black officer on the bus at the time, I bore the brunt of a lot of, racist remarks that made me feel, I would say, sick, and really questioned why I was in the job. Made me question why I was in the job at the time.
Yeah.
But I kind of likened it to being in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Where young people were dehumanized because of what they'd seen and what they'd experienced. And I think that day in particular at Tottenham, when Keith Blakelock was killed, a lot of police officers around me were dehumanized.
Yeah.
And all sense of humanity went out the window. So they were saying things and behaving in a way that were unprecedented, and using language. A lot of people using language that was unprecedented. I looked at some of the people and I thought, well, you're my friends.
Yeah.
And yet you're still saying these things about black people.
Yeah.
Not necessarily directed at me.
Yeah.
I was invisible.
Yeah.
And that was the worst day of my career. That is the worst day of my career, and I can't think of anything that comes close to that experience. And I went home that night. I had to be at work the next day. I was on late the next day. I got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't really sleep. Because of all the things that had happened. The most tragic thing that happened, of course, was Keith Blakelock being murdered, hacked to death by a mob. And that was tragic, absolutely. But it was all the things that I witnessed and experienced before and after that that really questioned why I needed to be in this job. Couldn't I just leave, put all this behind me? But I got up the next morning, eventually went to sleep, got up the next morning, went into work, just got on with it, because that's what happened in those days.
Well, no, I thank you for doing that, because you paved the way for pretty much most of, I would say, all the black officers that's still here now. Because if someone like you left, then there'd be like you were there at the inception of the BPA. If you had left prior, where would we be now? It would be even worse. So I'll just like to say thank you from everyone. And we appreciate you. But I'd like to play a game before we finish. Yeah, it's a cheat. I'm not gonna say we're cheating. Africa, how you travel, don't you? You're well travelled.
I've been around a bit.
There we go. Everyone that travels always says that. They're like, "Oh, try and be humble." Yeah, I've been around a little bit, And
it's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative.
Yeah.
It's all
okay,
relative.
cool. Well, we'll find out.
Yeah.
We can go back and forth, play a little game. We'll name countries in Africa. See, look, that response right there tells me that you're well versed in this.
No, not at all.
Nonchalantly, just raise the eyebrows.
Listen,
we got this.
I worked in South Africa for 8 years.
Here we go.
I worked in South Africa for 8
Exactly.
years.
Go.
So,
You work, go on. Tell me more. Did you work in South Africa? Did you go to Lesotho?
Lesotho.
See, he's gonna win.
Lesotho.
He's gonna win. I pronounce it Lesotho because I've never been there. And then we've got.
It's a kingdom in the middle of South Africa.
Was it called that?
The Mountain Kingdom.
What was it before called?
Mountain Kingdom. Lesotho.
Didn't have another name before that?
You've got me there.
It had. I should know this. Swaziland.
No, Swaziland is another nation.
Which one's that?
It borders South Africa.
So Swaziland is
to the
still
north.
Now.
It borders to the northeast. Swaziland.
Okay, let's go. I'll go. Swaziland.
So you got Zimbabwe, and then you got Namibia.
No, we go back and forth. Gosh, look! I'm gonna lose. This is gonna be painful. Mali. Go on, Mali.
Mali is more kind of.
No, it's your turn. You just say country.
Oh, a country.
This is how I know I'm
right.
going to lose.
Okay, Egypt.
He's describing the countries to me. He's been to them all. I'm going to lose. Go on.
Egypt.
Algeria.
Tanzania.
Sao Tome Principe.
Côte d'Ivoire.
Nigeria.
Ghana.
Benin.
DRC. Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Let's go down. Kenya.
Algeria.
I've done Algeria.
No.
No. Okay, Senegal.
Morocco.
The Western Sahara. It's a country. I'm not letting it go. It's there. It's on the map. It's a country. Western Sahara.
Have we had Algeria?
Yeah, you said Algeria.
Okay. Morocco.
You said Morocco.
Okay.
I feel like I'm out.
Libya.
Okay. Togo.
Syria.
No, Syria's not. Unless you want to be contentious and say we're gonna. Do you know what? I'm not even gonna argue that. You can have Syria. I'm totally fine with that. That's next to Egypt, right? Does Syria border Egypt? No. Yes. I want to say yes.
Well, it's about who puts the lines where, basically.
Because you say the same about the Gaza, because it's not owned by Egypt.
Okay.
Okay, but
Your turn.
My turn. Is it Cosmoros or Comoros?
Are you making these names up?
No, I'm not. You can check it after.
Okay. Cape Verde.
Madagascar.
Very good. Mauritius.
Mauritania.
Okay. Ethiopia.
Fine. Sudan.
South or north?
No, there was just Sudan, and then there's South Sudan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're two nations now, actually.
Yeah.
So I can have.
You
that's
can have the
why.
other one.
Yeah, I can have the other one.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Rwanda.
Eritrea.
Djibouti.
Lesotho. We've had Lesotho.
Yeah, we started that one.
We've had South Africa.
No.
Only because I mentioned.
No, we haven't
it.
had South Africa. No, you can have that.
Yeah.
I'll go with Guinea-Bissau.
Do we have Namibia?
Nope.
Namibia.
There's the other Guinea. It's not Papua Guinea. Papua New Guinea? Or Guinea, Equatorial Guinea.
Okay. I think you've probably exhausted it now.
No, we still have.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I've done all of the West. Actually, there's one more.
Gambia.
The Gambia. Cameroon.
We've got Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah, I
and
know.
then we've
There's
got
another
Congo.
one. But what's it called? It's not called that. But you know, I'll just let you have it because it's Central African Republic. Yeah. And you know what? We may have completed Africa. No, Djibouti,
I'm sure
Rwanda.
I'm
no,
sure we haven't.
We're nearly there. Kenya. And the islands.
Zimbabwe, didn't we?
I want to say no. Did you say?
Zimbabwe.
Okay, we've got our adjudicator at the back saying yes, we have had Zimbabwe. I can't think of any more. Wait, there may be one that we've missed. So we've only missed two. Oh, Sierra Leone.
Oh,
but then
goodness.
I think we've done Africa.
Oh,
I want to say that we did that.
Yeah.
So do you know what? You're the first person to do that with me. You know that. Most people. Wait, no. Somalia. No, you said Somalia. You said Somalia. I feel like you said Somalia.
I don't think I did actually. No,
You
I
said
didn't.
because
I did.
Eritrea has been said.
Eritrea, yeah.
Somalia.
And Ethiopia.
You
Not
said okay. Eritrea,
yeah.
Ethiopia, Somalia.
Yeah.
We've done the Sudan's, Swaziland, Lesotho, Comoros, Sao Tome Principe, Madagascar. There's no other islands. Cape Verde, you got that one.
Yeah.
We've done Western Sahara, Mauritius, Mauritania. Yeah, I think we. Yeah. Do you know what? I'll shake your hand. That was great. No one's ever done that before. That's great. You know what? That's a good way to sign off. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
We appreciate everything that you've done for the police and for black police officers that you're still doing now. It's your presence alone and your book. It's great. Everyone, wait, let me get the book. Everyone, get the book. Get it in shot. There we go. Get the book. It's a great book. I'm halfway in and I can't put it down now. Every time I go on the train, I read it, or the tube. I'm reading the book. It's great. But thank you once again.
Let me sign it for you.
Yes, you can sign it through. Thank you. I'll get you a pen in a second.
Get you a pen in a second, yeah.
But yeah, and we'll call it a day. Thank you very much once again.